Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk with Tubbs, a petrolhead's perspective. As always, I'm your host, Tapelo, aka Tubbs, and I'm going to talk you through this podcast that deals with everything motoring. We're going to talk what's new on the market, what's old on the market, what's good on the market, and also what's bad on the market. Then we're also going to delve into some motorsport, but more focused on my favorite form of motorsport, Formula One. We're going to talk driver lineups, what we feel, react, but most of all, I'm trying to give you a petrol head's perspective. Words that come from someone who's as passionate about the industry as anyone I know. So as ever, let me not waste your time. Here we go. Talk with Tubbs is a go. Another week, another manufacturer telling us that they're going to be fully electric by a certain time. And this time around, it's Audi. Look, I think it's been well documented on this podcast that I don't think electric cars are the future that the industry purports them to be. Whether someone in the industry is pushing these companies to this stage or there's lobbying or whatever is happening in the industry, I still don't think electric cars are the ultimate future, especially for a country like South Africa, where we have so many issues when it comes to electric vehicles, not only the infrastructure, but the pricing structure as well, and a lot of other things. As I've said in last week's podcast with reference to Lexus, right? So Audi came out and said that they will be fully electric by 2026. And this is follow on from brands like Jaguar saying they'll be fully electric by 2025, Ford saying 2030. I don't know, man. I don't know. I was having this conversation with a friend recently as well, and we tried to think and just try to visualize what the future will look like, particularly in South Africa, 10 years from now. What cars are going to be on the market, what will be selling, what's not selling, what will be discontinued, what is it going to look like with these companies saying that they're going to go fully electric, what's the local motoring climate going to look like. And it's so difficult to come up with a conclusion when you consider brands like Audi and them saying, no, we'll be fully electric. That's where we see the future. That's where we see the value. And then you get BMW coming out and saying, no, they'll make their electric cars, but they'll not stop developing internal combustion engines. They still see business in that. And you've got other brands like Porsche who are investing heavily in synthetic fuel. So at this present moment, yes, I'm not saying companies have to follow the same strategy, companies have to have the same goals, but ultimately, especially when you're competing within the same market, there tends to be certain similarities between your strategies. There tends to be correlation between what you guys are doing. So in this present time, we've got really large disparities in the way these companies are going about their business. So to try and visualize a future 10 years, 15 years from now, not only the world, but when you try and narrow it down to particular markets, it gets so difficult because who's right, who's wrong, who's going to win, who's going to lose, who's going to eventually have to backtrack on certain decisions that they made. Let's not forget, nothing is set in stone for now. I am of the belief that a lot of these companies that are saying they're going to be fully electric by year X are going to, as we get closer to that day, to that date, to that year, whatever the strategic plan is, as we get closer to that, I feel like they're going to start realizing how ambitious the idea was, but how the implementation is so far from the ambition. I think they are going to struggle to make that plan come to fruition, and they're eventually going to end up backtracking on the ultimate goal that they had to go electric. So they might diversify the portfolio where half their portfolio is electric to try and comply with emission standards and all that type of stuff. I mean, there is pressure on the companies. We cannot deny that. But I think they're going to reach a stage where half will be electric, half will be a very reasonable compromise at this stage where half your powertrains are really hybrid, where you've got an internal combustion engine with a hybrid powertrain added onto that. It's so difficult. Like I'm saying, it's so difficult. So seeing this by Audi just got me thinking about what the future will look like. And it's tough. It's tough. Look, I'm all for companies trying to future-proof themselves. But as you know, I don't believe this is the future. I think the future is not as extreme as we might think, if that makes sense. We're not going to the extreme of everything electric, but we're not also going to stay with the extreme of everything being an internal combustion engine powered car, burning fuel, diesel, whatever. I think the future lies somewhere within the compromise, somewhere within the middle. I'm not sure whether to which side it will lean, but I think the future is somewhere in the middle. And I'd hate to see a lot of these companies divesting in certain projects, failing in their endeavors to become fully electric, and then having to readjust, reinvest, repurpose, and rebuild certain divisions that will have been phased out because of this plan that they had. That's my only worry for a lot of these companies. But alas, I'm not on the management team of these companies. I'm just a guy who sits in their room and records a podcast commenting on what these guys are doing. So I might be wrong. I might be right. There's no telling at this moment. It's just going to be a very long waiting game where we have to sit and ultimately see what these companies have in store for the future and subsequently for us as consumers of those companies. Now, moving on from one German brand to another German brand, Porsche. Again, I'm a little behind, but I'm still trying to catch up and I'm still trying to react to stuff. So Porsche released the latest 992 GT3 Touring. For those that don't know, essentially the Touring is a GT3 with reduced aero. It doesn't have the large wing, and the aero elements are a bit reduced. So it's a more road-based, more road-compliant setup of a GT3. And look, as a Porsche guy, I've become a big fan of Porsche over the past few years. And when they came out with a 911R, I remember the hype around that car. You know, oh, this is a GT3, but more raw and then when the 991 generation Touring came out, in my mind at least, it removed the desire for a 911R because essentially you had the same kind of idea, slightly different interpretations, but this you could drive. It wasn't a collector's car where you would be so conscious about putting any mileage on that car. You literally just had a GT3 that's more road biased. So with the 992, I'm not surprised that they're doing this. And I'm also not surprised by the decision to make the 992 Touring more accessible by giving it the PDK option. You know, I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind how good the PDK platform is for Porsche, but also their manual platform is good. That's why the 991 Touring became such a sensation. It was loved, and I think that's going to translate as well to the 992. Reacting upon the pictures, I like the 992. I think it looks great. For the Touring specifically, I'm not really sure on the front, but maybe I just haven't seen enough pictures to kind of suss out dimensions and how it's supposed to look. This reminds me of my reaction to the G80 M3, where I always said, to my eyes, there was a detail that didn't sit right. Something about the proportions wasn't right around the A pillar and the windscreen, just that meeting point. And then it was said in a video and it made sense what the problem was. So I'm still looking at the 992 Touring pictures and trying to figure out, you know, if I like it or not. I like the platform, I like the car. I'm just trying to figure out what doesn't sit right with me and stopping me from eventually loving the car. That being said, however, I still am a big fan of the 991 generation. That's really the Porsche 911 generation that cemented my love for the brand, and it's from that platform that my love and appreciation for the brand grew onto other models. So I don't think it looks as good as that generation. Very few Porsches actually will in my mind, but I think it's such a good platform, such a beautiful car. I think it will sell in numbers. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Also, Porsche has said that the GTS models are available. Again, for those of you that don't know, the GTS is essentially a package, a spec package added onto their model. So you'll get a Carrera GTS, you'll get a Targa GTS, you'll get Panamera GTS. Essentially what it does is it boosts power, and I think they tune the suspension a little bit differently just to make it a more sporty handling car. So it's really the compromise between the comfort orientated versions and the fully sport stuff. So with a 911, the GTS is kind of the middle ground before you get to the GT products, you know. And man, I love these things. I think depending on the kind of person you are and what you're looking for, I think the GTS might be the perfect package if you're trying to balance comfort and usability, sporty handling and fun, but also the financial implications. You're trying to get something that's a tad more affordable than maybe, say, a GT3. I think the GTS models just hit the right blend of all those components. You know, I've seen a few 991s. I'm a big fan. I wouldn't blink twice at the opportunity to own something like a Carrera GTS. You know, I'm all for that. Speaking of which, I saw a 993, I think a week or so ago now. I'm not a big fan of old Porsches, but sometimes when you see them, they do manage just to catch your attention, and you kind of understand why some people like that design of the old 911s. But I digress. So yeah, GT3 Touring on the way. I know that's going to sell. A lot of people are going to love that. GTS models are going to be on the way as well. Yeah, I think that's a good compromise if you really don't want to go too extreme with your Porsche ownership and go for something like a GT product. Get the GTS. You'll be more than happy. You'll be satisfied. It's just the one to go for at this point. Moving on from the more commercial news to Formula One. Look, commercial news have been very scarce and limited these days, or maybe I'm just not looking hard enough. But seemingly Formula One is making all the headlines these days. So, yeah. It came out during the week that the FIA is looking to clamp down on fast pit stops as a result of certain teams complaining about the safety aspect of having pit stops being too fast. Now, this really rubs me up the wrong way. This really does. Because for years, if you follow Formula One, you know how big of a strategic advantage a fast and well executed pit stop can be. We've seen races won and lost simply by a mistake in the pit lane or a mistake in getting your pit stops incorrect, taking too long. These things happen, you know. Pit stops have become such a fundamental part of Formula One. And it was because of this that teams worked so hard to maximize the performance that they can during pit stops. This is why Red Bull strives to continuously hit sub 2-second pit stops. That's why they practice them, because it's such a strategic advantage. So for the FIA to come in and say that they're looking to slow them down to account for human error, I mean, it's such a flimsy statement to kind of justify that they're bending under pressure from other teams, namely Mercedes. If this really is Mercedes, I haven't read a lot about it. So if this really is Mercedes complaining about Red Bull having faster pit stops, I think they're being petulant. But at the same time, that's just competition. It's so different. It leaves you indifferent to how to feel about the whole thing. And I'm gonna go back to the article I wrote for Driver Mod about Christian Horner and Toto Wolff, and I'm just gonna give context by reading the last part. I said something along the lines of, in particular reference to Toto Wolff and Christian Horner. I said, I see two principals at the pinnacle of motorsport showing some great gamesmanship and trying to undercut the other through any means necessary. Does it leave a sour taste in your mouth? Perhaps, but vindication will be garnered by the principal that leads their team to a constructors' title and even a drivers' championship victory. Honestly, this is common in sports, especially when rivals are matched and have to resort to other tactics to get the edge. The FIA is the pawn in this game, while Horner and Wolff are the master tacticians. No matter what happens, come the end of the season, all's fair in love and war. And I think the moment I saw this, this is what came to mind. This is exactly what I was talking about, where these guys are trying so hard to undercut each other, try and scrutinize, have the other team under scrutiny, or manipulate situations so that the other team suffers by using the FIA as their weapons. Go complain to the FIA, have the FIA investigate, have the FIA charge, have the FIA punish. We saw this with the flexi wing, have them remove their ring, implement new tests. This is what happens in sport. But this is the problem. Sometimes this competition is so entrenched in teams that they don't realize what it does to the sport. For fans, it was great to see a 2-second pit stop. It's something that we could rave about. It's something that we continuously had conversations about. How are people achieving this feat in such a small amount of time? It was brilliant to see that choreography, that planning, that execution. That's a part of the sport that's, like I said, it's a strategic advantage. So to slow it down to try and equalize the field is literally trying to have teams fight with one hand behind their back. This is not a regulation issue. This is teams working towards an aspect of their performance that they feel they can capitalize on. This is why teams build powerful engines. This is why teams build smart suspension. That's a competitive advantage. So to clamp down on fast pit stops, it's a waste of time. And the reasoning as well, because of a safety aspect, how many pit stops have we seen go wrong to an extent that they were deemed unsafe? Really not that many. I think, hell, driving the car is more of a risk than a pit stop going wrong. These guys have become so good at doing these quick pit stops. They've perfected the formula that, yes, slight things occur. We saw that with Valtteri Bottas's nut being sheared off. We see these things, but they're not that dangerous for them to be clamped down on and ruin the strategic advantage that some teams have. It's just a decision that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm sure quite a lot of you that are listening to this, it's a decision that you don't necessarily agree with as well. I just see this as the FIA bending under pressure and just showing that they really do not want to take a stand against these teams. They'd rather flow with the wind and just maybe favoritism. I don't know. But yeah, man, this is a decision that really doesn't make sense to me. But ultimately, it's a decision that we're going to have to live with. So, with that said, let's just move on to the Styrian GP that was this weekend. Yeah, it was a good race. It was a good race. It was a good race. I won't touch on the race because for large portion, excuse me, dropped my phone. I won't touch on the race because for large portions of the race, it was really processional. Whoever was in front kind of sat in front. There weren't a lot of overtakes, but there were, and it was an overall solid race. It wasn't 2020 levels of solid race, but it was a solid race nevertheless. What I want to touch on is just the highlights, certain key aspects in the race that I feel were pivotal to how things went on. And I'm going to talk about Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas needed that kind of performance this weekend. Yes, it was unfortunate that he had to start the race 3 places down from where he qualified because of his spin in the pit lane during free practice 2, I think, which is really weird. I did not expect to see that from a top Formula 1 driver, but these things happen. So yeah, he needed this kind of performance, and he proved how good he can be, because this was similar to the French Grand Prix in the sense that Mercedes had kind of left him out to dry because of poor strategic calls that Red Bull have seemingly started to nail again. When Sergio Perez went in for his second stop, he looked odds on to pass Valtteri Bottas later in the race. Bottas managed the gap brilliantly and defended again in the last lap. That wasn't down to the team. That was down to Bottas showing glimpses of the potential that he has. And that's what's been so frustrating with him this season. He's dropped so low below the expectations, the levels of his performance that we know, that it kind of caught us by surprise. But I think he needed this result this week. He needed a drive where he could hold on. He needed a drive where he could defend and get crucial points. I think that's important for his confidence. I think that's important for Mercedes as a team. Again, following on from last week, I still think something is not right with Mercedes. They're making disastrous strategy calls. They're really being flat-footed. They're not being as dynamic as they used to be. I just think something is not gelling in that team, in that garage. And for further context, just go back to episode 11 of my podcast from last week. I explained and went into proper detail about how I feel things are at Mercedes and what I feel is hindering them from success this year. Again, Max Verstappen was just brilliant. The guy can really do no wrong at this point in time. He's on top of his game. His team is on top of his game. His car is on top of its game. And things are just working out perfectly for him. Lewis Hamilton is also driving brilliantly. I know it doesn't seem like it because you've gotten so used to Hamilton dominating at the front of the grid. So him finishing second, third, whatever, it feels like a failure. But I just think that's him overperforming in a period of Mercedes where things aren't just as sun and rosy as they used to be. George Russell, how unfortunate is that guy? I really don't see why these things continuously happen to him. He was in a position to possibly get points, his first points for Williams, just based on merit. He was driving so brilliantly, and for things just to fail the way they did, you have to feel for the guy. You have to feel for the guy. And I can understand frustrations amongst him and amongst his fandom. I think for people to say he bottled it during the race on Sundays is a bit harsh considering the performance of that car. So I think for him to continuously qualify so much higher on Saturday and then kind of fall back into the race just shows how good he is in that car and how much he's pulling it to where he puts it on Saturday. But ultimately, there's only so much you can do, especially in a race situation. So, yeah. Charles Leclerc, mixed bag of results, really. Fantastic drive. He won driver of the day. I also thought he had a fantastic drive. I sang his praises quite a lot to friends and stuff. But I also saw someone said that he was very lucky not to get a penalty because a lot of the retirements and a lot of damage to cars was because of him. Yeah, I can't talk too much about that. I didn't go deep into the replays and stuff. But yes, I know he made contact. Even he said he went to apologize to Pierre Gasly because Gasly's retirement was as a result of him being hit by Charles Leclerc. So yeah, maybe something the FIA should look into about how lenient they are about the damage caused by a driver. But ultimately, he had a stunning comeback drive and he proved that he still is talented. Whether things are going bad or good, he still has the talent to surprise a few people. But yeah, overall, the race was good. This week, again, back at the same track, hoping for a few different things, hoping for more overtakes, hoping for more performance. It's going to be interesting. This season is setting up itself as a very competitive season where a simple mistake could tilt the championship and results vastly. And I think we saw this in Azerbaijan with Max Verstappen retiring, and it looked set for Hamilton to get a massive haul of points, and then one mistake renders that impossible. So it's a good season. Looking forward to the race this week again. And that's it for me this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. As you know, always, I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the feedback. Always available to listen, always available to have a chat. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, follow me on my social media at tabs_Meriohle, THAPZ_MEREOHLE. Again, tune in next week for Talk with Tabs. Thank you so much. Hope you guys have a good week. Hope everyone is safe. Love you all. Cheers.